so spaced out. Benny and the Jets. I don't have a candle, so we popped a La Croix. A La Croix? A La Croix. I call them LaCroix because I don't. I'm an American. Okay. Well, welcome back, everybody. We sure have missed you. Tonight we're going to talk with our friend Lindsay. Okay, you may not know what that means, but no matter. Here. I know, it was a good one, wasn't it, Denise? Thought you'd like that. I could pick things that I think we both like. All right.
Hey, ladies.
I'm so glad to be back.
I'm so glad to be back, too.
Uh-oh. Are you getting who's getting feedback? Are you getting feedback? Are we going to play the feedback game?
I don't know. I hope
No,
not.
it sounds better.
Yeah.
Sounds okay.
Okay.
It sounds good when you're talking.
Okay.
I'll just put my little microphone on when I'm not talking, and then if it's on my side, that should help.
Okay. It sounds pretty good now, though, so. All right. Well, welcome back, everybody. I know winter seems like it should be a quieter time, but it's been busy. There's been an injury we gotta get an update on Sweet Zen, so I'm gonna let you do that, Denise. But hi, Lindsay. I'm sorry that I was not here last time.
That's okay.
I had a bit of a teenage problem on my hands, and it won over that night. So thank you for being here. And we're going to talk in just a second about why you're here, but I wanted Denise to update us on Zen first.
Yeah.
That's hot topic.
I am hearing feedback now.
Okay, let me mute myself.
Okay. So this is complicated. I mean, I will say that I was entered in a trial last weekend and I didn't go because my dog came up with some kind of a problem. And I'm going to a rehab vet next Wednesday to get a kind of god-awful nose to tail workup to try to find out what the problem is. But here's the thing. I'm pretty good with unsolicited feedback. Like, I'm pretty good at letting it just wash off me, but I'm not when it comes to my dog's medical stuff. I'm not okay with 50 people sending me messages saying, I think you should check this. And when my dog had that, he actually had cancer and then he blew up the next day. Like, I am not there. So I'm going to just say right now publicly that, yeah, my dog's got something going on. I would like to fix it. I will not tell people what the problem is when I know, because I just am not ready for your, turmeric paste. I just don't want to do that. So I just tell you that I want my dog to get better, and I have access to the best experts in the world who will walk me through this. I got the equipment, I got the cold laser, I got the PEMF pad, and I got the resources to pay for all the things to get my dog all better. So as much as I know you want to help me out, don't. That's it. So that's my update.
I said about one thing about it, and when you told me you had a cold laser at home, I was like, that's next level. I mean, I could only aspire to have an acupuncturist on speed dial and a cold laser at home. Yeah, I feel you on that. It's that happens, I think, to all of us, or it's most irritating to all of us, I think, when it's in our own area of interest. It makes it, because you know how much you've put into trying to understand these things. And well, good. I think that's a perfect update. We know that you are on it and the team is on it. So, Lindsay, this conversation between the three of us started over a paper. Wasn't it over a paper that you were a part of? And I am going to fumble that. So I'm going to let you talk about that.
Yeah. So hi, everyone. My name is Lindsay Waldrop, and I am a assistant professor at Chapman University, which is a mid-sized private university in Southern California in Orange County. And I just am the senior author on a paper called, I actually don't remember what the title is, embarrassingly. But it was about essentially, we looked at a bunch of dog skulls, CT scans, and we analyzed the shape of those. And we asked just the question, okay, so if we're really good at selecting dogs to do certain physical tasks like biting or scent work or something like that, we should be able to see that those signals in the shape of the skull. Like if you're using your skull to bite stuff, it should have a different shape. If you're selected for biting, that it bites better, and not as a different shape if it, if you're a dog that's not bred for bite work. And what we found was that there was no signal at all, that dogs have dog-shaped skulls, essentially. um, and that, in terms of performance with things like bite tasks and scent tasks, especially because that's primarily what we looked at, there doesn't seem to be a really strong shape constraint for there. And my interpretation of this is kind of, we're not actually that good at selecting for the physical traits that might make dogs better at these functional tasks. Now, behavior is a totally different thing. You can talk about like the hardware of your computer and the software of your computer, right? And this is a hardware only paper, right? We didn't talk about why you might see, even though a lab can bite as hard as a German Shepherd, why you don't see a lot of labs doing police work and patrol work. So totally separate question, but probably ends up being more important.
I love this because I have long said that, like, a Labrador is a great example. A working line lab and a show line lab could not have less in common. Honest to God. No, really, like, it's like a Cocker Spaniel and a Pit Bull. They are so temperamentally different. It's not that they look so different. I can look at them and say they're both Labradors. Although I can also look at them and say that's a Labrador, and I'm so sorry you have that dog because that's not what you thought you were getting. Like, I can just kind of tell that's a working line lab, not a show line lab. And then I'll see somebody else with a show line lab, and they've kind of laid out what their plan is, and I'm like, all right, well, let's see what you get. But for sure, I know it's the heart of the dog. I remember looking at a Labrador puppy. I was training this puppy. It wasn't my dog, and it was like 4 months old, and like an airplane. No, wait, you know what? It was a shot. Somebody shot a gun, and the dog looked at the sky. I almost fell over. Like, this dog has never hunted. Nothing. How the hell did that dog know to look at the sky so, like, things like that are just like mind-boggling. And with my own dogs, when I've taken them into the environment of like IGP or ring sport or whatever, they know what a suit is. I do not know how they know what a suit is, but they know it from 50 feet away. You can see them going, I want that. And it's just like, wow, because they're so bred for it. And like the heart, what I care about is the heart of the dog. And I actually think that a working Labrador and a working Belgian have more in common than a working Labrador and a show Labrador. And I would say the same for a Belgian. I would say a show Belgian has more in common with a show Lab than a show Belgian has in common with a working Belgians. They're simply different. And it's not a physical thing at all. It's what's inside. It's the drive. It's what the dog cares about.
The Drahar that my boyfriend has, that he hunts with, that he has 4 dogs, and he says he spends 70% of his time with that dog. It reminds me of people with Mouse and like working line German Shepherds. It's essentially the same. He's just doing a slightly different, thing by pointing. But yeah, I could totally see that.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I think that one of the reasons why we looked at this paper or did this study specifically, is we did group them by kennel club groupings, because presumably they're functional, right? Like working dogs and sporting dogs and all of this stuff. We did UKC and AKC, and the only groups that really came out as different were companions and toys, because they have smush faces. So they stand
interesting because we talk a lot about how important form over function. You hear this all the time. And when you're breeding for a specific breed, and they have great tails. I actually love the stories. I really believed that Basset Hounds had long ears so they could scoop up scent. I was quite disappointed.
I was heartbroken as well, Denise, when we had that discussion all together. I was like, I have been going around the universe telling people that.
Me too. You and me spreading the lies. But it's such an appealing lie to me. It's like, oh, it just adds so much value to those soft, velvety ears. You pet them and you're soaking up all the scent. Good boy, good boy. And then they found out it was like a pug. It was the best scent work dog. I'm like, what? You're ruining my vision, or even just coat, simple things like the double coated breeds, the sled dogs. But the actual sled dogs, if you go up there, they don't look anything like the show dogs. They don't have these huge, long, fluffy coats. They actually have a very functional coat. It's kind of a short, thick coat. And they didn't look anything like the show dog, but it's like, oh, that's just so disheartening.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of I don't call them lies so much as I call them stories. They're just stories about what we want them to be, but not necessarily true. Well, my background, I started in high school showing dogs in conformation and junior showmanship. And so I've been around this sort of like lore, these origin narratives, we call them in the paper, for a really long time. And it's really interesting because as I went into college and I started training comparative biomechanics, which is basically the study of organisms and how they function, the structure. And I look specifically at fluid structure interactions in my research. So I'm really a fluid dynamicist at heart. But I started really looking at these things and going, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I can see sort of, but has anybody tested it? And like 99% of the time, nobody's ever tested it. It's just something people.
An example of that, when she's talking about lore, you guys, an example we would all know that everyone's familiar with is pit bulls are nanny dogs. There is no fact at all ever in that story. That is not. I will have people bet me, like we're in a casino, on like, well, it is not. They, as a matter of fact, they were. And it's those kinds of things. They just get repeated and repeated. And that one story came from one magazine article. An off the cuff mention of they're great for. It was one lady saying that about her one staffy. It wasn't about, and then that stuff gets repeated and repeated, and it becomes, for all intents and purposes, fact in the general consciousness. It's just crazy to me.
Okay, so we're 15 minutes in on this live, and I feel like I'm in a confessional because I shared that too.
I mean, until
blasphemy,
right? Until somebody looks at it and studies it closely, like it might as well be true. I mean, I have tons of these.
What are tell them? Tell them.
Well, one of the
awesome.
One of the things that we specifically call out in the paper is this: pit bulls have locking jaws, or some dogs have locking jaws, because this is a really pervasive myth, and it's very clearly demonstrably untrue. You look at their skulls, they are not different. You cannot tell the skull of a pit bull between any other freaking dog or a coyote or a wolf. Like, there's just no physical basis for that at all. What the locking is they just don't want to let go. And I've had, German Shepherds and like my Belgians, they decide they don't want to let go, and barring a bite bar to get them off, like, they're not letting go until they decide to. So there's just tons of them. Like, bloodhounds have the flues that gather odor, and I think that's a good one for biomechanics that I think about a lot. I don't think that there's any truth probably to that either. What are other ones? Like the poodle haircut is specifically
the dander on. Oh, wait.
The poops.
The feet, the joints,
it's not
keeping
to
warm.
Keep their joints warm?
I mean, like, I don't know. Has anybody tested this? Probably not.
My God.
Just a little common sense, so if you just stop and think about it, if your hair gets wet and you're in the swimming pool, does the hair on your head keep your head warmer? So do people have short hair on their heads have a colder swimming experience than those fluffy haired people? I have some questions about that.
Oh, this is great.
Say about, like, I think wool socks will keep your feet warmer when they're wet. This is one of the things that we use. I also do biology, and one of the things that there's two ways of doing rocky intertidal work. There's the I'm going to get hip waders to keep my feet totally dry, and then continue to patch those hip waders until the heat death that they
come. Yeah.
Yeah, or there's like, just screw it, I'm gonna get wet, so I might as well just do it. Old pair of tennis shoes and wool socks, and the wool socks will help keep your feet sort of warm. But that's like a different situation.
Fascinating.
Well,
I was going to say about
wear the
poodles
tennis
about the
shoes
dander.
and keep the socks like in your shirt or something. And then you walk across the water, and then you take your shoes off and you put your dry socks on. I mean, that to me would seem to be the best option.
Definitely. But like when you're out there for hours, like getting wet and stuff, it's just like, it does make a little bit of a difference. It's not huge. Anything.
Well, now I know.
West Coast just has such cold
Yeah.
water. If you're out there for a long time, it's just like,
it's chilly.
It's very chilly. Like
chillier, and you're down south, so you're a little bit warmer than I am.
Yes. I did most of my stuff up in the San Francisco Bay.
Oh, excellent, excellent. So you were near me.
And up in the North Coast. And I did a lot of diving as well as in Monterey while I was in graduate school. Yeah, I went to graduate school at UC Berkeley, so I was there for about 6 years.
Since we're not telling lies, we're just telling stories, can I tell a very tiny story?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. I live on Sonoma Mountain, or my ranch is on Sonoma Mountain Road in Petaluma. And I learned recently that the Indian tribes in the area considered that where the world started. That's where the coyote started the world. So I can find my street in books. And I'm reading a book right now about my road, about how the two old ladies, the two crows, are sitting up on Sonoma Mountain, and they're describing creeks and streets and towns around me. And I am just smitten. And I think it's true. I do think that coyote started the world right there in my backyard. I am at the center of the universe. I've always known it. I've always known I was the center of the universe. And here we have.
I'm going to say it feels right. This feels right.
It works for me.
I believe it.
I love reading these little bedtime stories of my own neighborhood. I don't know why it's as true as the next, so I'm running with it. Unless you go off and research it and come up with a reason why I'm wrong.
Well, I mean, so here's an interesting thing. I think that science has a really rotten reputation for telling people, and telling especially people who have religious beliefs or something like that, oh, you're wrong, and we can prove it because of X, Y, and Z. I am, I guess, a lot more liberal in my views than a lot of other scientists, that if something when you look at a lot of different scientific theories and things like this, they change all the time too, based on different observations. And there's even some science philosophers that say these different, we call them paradigms. We've heard the term paradigm shift before, right? That these paradigms don't even explain more of the world, they just explain like a different subset of observations of the world. And I just think that indigenous knowledge and stories and religious knowledge and stories is just a different way of understanding the world. It's not more right, it's not less right, it's just different. So like, I'm never going to be like, no, I can disprove that the coyotes didn't start the world. Like, that's really meaningful for a lot of people. So
I think if everything becomes about the logical explanation scientifically, then we miss out on the wonderment of what we cannot explain. I was watching Alone, Australia, and one of the guys was indigenous. His family was like indigenous or Aboriginal, I guess you would say, but he was white, so they weren't Aboriginal. They had a name. His family had been there a very long time, and he was talking about how he was like mixed, I think, and he was talking about how the stars, they call it something, and I can't remember the the word in his language, but it was basically to teach their children that it's the campfires of your ancestors. I was
Yeah.
like, what? It's like Buripa or something like that. And so when you look up at the sky every night, like the stars that were in the Milky Way,
Mm-hmm.
like that's your ancestors, and you're never alone because they're always with you. I was like, that's so much cooler than that's a ball of gas.
On fire.
And you know what? I think you can hold both of those side by
Oh, yeah,
side.
you can.
And
I do it all the time.
because this book I'm reading is called The Forgetters. And basically it's telling stories of including the Indian people and the white people. And it's telling, there's real facts in there. There's definitely historical realities of when the white people came and what happened and when they moved the Indians and where the Indians went into the towns. The parts that's not fact is when they say 5 people stayed behind and then a white person kind of stumbled on. That's when they verge. But what's interesting is the purpose of the stories is unity and to understand things in a way that creates a connection among people so that we can live together. I mean, frankly, a lot of religion is the same way. Most religion is actually based on unity, kindness, and, it goes awry pretty quickly. But that the basis is generally designed to make society work.
Mm-hmm.
And so these stories, as you read them, only good things can come from people taking the kernel from the story. Don't worry about the accuracy of the story. That's actually not the important part. What's important is, what are they trying to tell you? And that part is good and useful. And if you look up at the skies and you're lonely and you see your ancestors up there looking down, supporting you, it doesn't actually matter if at that moment you have a division in your head. If it brings warmth to your world, it's okay. And you can easily say, no, I know they're balls of gas. It makes me feel better to look at them and visualize that's my mother who passed. It's okay. There's no harm done.
Yeah.
It could become harmful if you can't grasp that a story is not the reality.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not the story that's the problem.
Yeah.
But anyway, those are
on the other side of that too. I think that there's a lot of storytelling, especially in indigenous cultures, that actually hold a lot of some good scientific truths as well. I mean, these are people who are, every time I think and dive more into indigenous storytelling and about the natural world, realized how incredibly intelligent those people were. And they watched patterns for tens of thousands of years, right? And they have so much knowledge, and it's been a travesty for the past, X number of years, decades and hundreds of years, that scientists are like, oh, well, they think coyote, like the world started with coyotes on that mountain, like, psh, none of that's useful. It's such a ridiculous, I don't know, it's so silly just because of different origin stories like that, to immediately discount the amount of knowledge that people have amassed. In that long of a time period too. So I think there's a lot of scientists that are really trying to reach out and document a lot of this stuff, but also just incorporate it into, with the California fires, it's one thing that the indigenous people in California had figured out how to manage fires. And even as white people erect it. So it's like, there's a lot of really interesting projects going back and trying to get back that indigenous knowledge and try to make like better management policies as well, which is super cool. So I love it. My research really doesn't have anything to do with that type of stuff. It's very esoteric, but yeah, even the dog origin stories, it's not terrible. They're just stories. So
Yeah.
So I do have a question then.
Yeah.
So often when we think something is a fact, that's when things become problematic. So we think that the basset hound has long ears to scoop up scent, and therefore we breed dogs with long ears. That's fine until the ears are so long that the dog steps on them when they walk, and now they have scabs on their ears and they have problems. And then if you say, maybe you should stop breeding dogs with ears that are quite that long, the response is, well, we can't, because that is their fundamental nature, right? So that's where I think it can become a problem. And there are plenty of dog breeds out there that are in trouble, and that's not all I'm going to say about it. They're in trouble. And the fact that people are so committed to whatever, they must look this way because of this, they must have this color, they must have this ear shape, that is where I think it gets to be a problem. No, they have to have this structure, even though, frankly, the structure is causing significant issues for them. No, they must, because it allows them to move this way over to. Well, yes, but it's also causing the dogs to suffer. And I think that's where things get problematic.
I mean, as a biomechanist, I look at some dogs and they're like, oh, this is efficient movement. And I was like, okay, no. Like, define efficiency for me, please, because I don't see it there. And so a lot of this, I think a lot of the things that people say about movement are probably stories as well. I don't see a lot of, you know, genuine biomechanical, and because if you talk about efficiency, it's not just the way that they're moving, it's the amount of oxygen that they're consuming as well, right? Efficiency is, it has a word in my, it has a meaning, a specific meaning in my world in science. And efficient movement is, first of all, probably not what people think it is, and second of all, I think that because dogs are such a complex system with so many different moving parts, there's probably more than one way to have an efficient gait as well. So I think that that's another thing that people, and they're so flexible that I think that you can get a dog that probably looks like a train wreck and actually has quite efficient movement because they've just altered their body through, we call it plasticity, of just, changing stuff based on the inputs and training that are fine. They end up doing a really good job and being perfectly efficient too. So as efficient as a well-bred dog. So it's I used to follow Blair Braverman, who was this musher in Alaska, and she had this dog named Grinch, and the dog just was a hot mess. I mean, it looked like it was put together with spare parts. And this dog used to run like 1,000-kilometer races with everybody else, and needed a little bit more support and care because he was such a mess. But
if you think about human beings,
mm-hmm.
if you think about the world-class gymnasts, runners, and all, they have certain things in common. They really do. Like your endurance runners tend to be skinny little things, right? They tend to be long legs and all. But we don't spend a lot of time measuring the length of the thigh bone, the length of the shin bone, comparing them and saying, this one's going to run really fast, but this one over here, because there's obviously a lot more going on that you can't line up 100 people and divide them into the 50 fastest and the 50 slowest runners. But the implication is that you could do that. You could look at people and divide them up, and you would get it so far wrong because so much more goes into that. Like you talked about, what's your VO2 max? What is your muscle? We're not measuring that. We're
really
looking very much at
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
that's okay.
Just for people that don't understand what we're talking about, or maybe they need an example, we all watch Sha'Carri Richardson get gold. Right. I mean, she's my height. She's tiny. And then she's next to Gabby, who's like 6 feet tall with legs like a thoroughbred. But Sha'Carri is faster than her. And she looks more like what you would think of like if you compared the two, a running back to a wide receiver. Mm-hmm. It's just that what Denise is saying is that you can't just look at someone and know that they're automatically going to be faster. And that's what we're saying about dogs as well. Sorry, Denise, go ahead.
No, that's fine, because there's a lot of emphasis, like at 8 weeks, people talking about, I'm looking for my next sports prospect and I want this, that, and the other. And it's not that these things are wrong, but I can tell you that the number one thing I'm looking at is the parents and the pedigree, not the individual puppy. Because if the parents work their little hearts out, like my border collie, I can already see it, can run and run and run and run and run. And it's not like he's well put together. He's structurally sound. Mm-hmm. But if you compare him to the dogs in the show ring, he does not look like those dogs. He has a completely different, his head is low. He just looks border collie weird, But my God, can that dog move? And at 9 months of age, I think he could move 10 miles. He barely even pants. Like when I bring him back.
He looks like a stock dog to me.
Yeah, I've never seen him hard panting. Even when he's running, he comes back, he's kind of like, It's no real effort
Wow.
because something's going on with his oxygen, his efficiency, the way his muscles come together. And he doesn't even feel all that muscular yet. He's still a baby. Like Zen feels like a muscle. He's like a bodybuilder because he's older. But I don't know that, like, if you put your hands on Zen, he's stronger because he's bigger. But I'm not actually sure that pound for pound that's true. I'm really not. And I can't just look at the dog with the heavier muscle mass and say that's the stronger dog. He's also twice as big. So that scrawny puppy of mine, there's a lot there to work with, and he would not be successful in the show ring. He's a little bit cowhawk. They don't like that. He doesn't have that movement that they're looking for. Those 45-degree angles, front and rear, give you a certain look and balance. He doesn't look like that, you know, and the fact that he sort of crouches when he moves, that's all weird. It's working for him. And the reason it's working, because it works for his parents, it works for his grandparents, or they wouldn't have been bred, because they are all hardcore working dogs. They're out there doing it. They don't sit there saying, oh, that one doesn't have good structure. They say, can it do it? It doesn't get hurt all the time. If it gets hurt all the time and can't do it, then don't breed it. And if you breed it, you're probably not going to like it, so you stop breeding it. So the ones that get bred a lot, very successful 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old dogs that are running long and hard. And I mean, I'm very much in the, what can the dog do? That is my number one driver. I'm not saying I don't look at structure. I do. But the number one thing I'm going to look at is show me the parents. What can they do? Show me what they can do as adults, and I'll extrapolate from there, rather than saying, oh, this puppy shows so much, because it's just a puppy. You know,
That's why they have pointer
drive.
trials. That's why they have pointer trials, because they want you to prove that your dog can do the job and how well they can do it. Can they do all the components? Do they look good when they're doing it? You know, that's a really interesting.
One of the things that I found really interesting about even the dog skull study that we just did is that we seem to be really, I mean, it's not that we can't drive crazy morphological change in dogs. It's true. I mean, dogs are one of the species that has the most variation of anything we call like a group of animals, a species. I mean, imagine a Great Dane versus a Chihuahua. Like, we have driven enormous, wild morphological changes, but we're not good at performance-based change. And I think that's because we are very good at picking out things that we can see clearly. Well, like, I want a dog with a shorter face. Boom, we got lots of dogs with short faces. But I want a dog who bites really well. That's such a performance-based, multifactorial, you know, hard to quantify visually thing that we end up kind of sucking at doing that. Beyond, I mean, there's good bite dogs, right? But physically, you can't, again, look at a dog and say that dog is going to bite, right? It's going to be a great biter. We're just not very good at doing this. And the other distinction I'll say is that, you know, there's obviously pugs can not run fast and greyhounds can. Well, greyhounds, I mean, the performance of that is really easy. You put a bunch of dogs in a line and see who wins. Like, you know, that's an easy thing visually to pick out and quantify for us in a relative sense anyway. So it's this weird thing that we're just like not good at doing stuff if we can't visually see the difference.
Well, I can see with greyhounds, you have this huge advantage because, like you just said, there's really only one thing, and it's a stopwatch. How simple is that? Whereas biting is, the dog could have the most amazing jaws in the world. If it doesn't want to use them, it's irrelevant, right? It's like, so there's so much in there. And then there's other issues about, you know, how much energy does the dog have? There's just so much. That's quite complicated. In my personal observation, it's interesting having a new breed because I really know Belgians very well. I've been in the breed a long time. I've seen a lot over a long time, a lot of change and a lot of way of thinking. I don't have that background in the Border Collie world, but I do know that there are working Border Collies, like trial collies and farm collies. And I know there are sort of performance collies, like sort of agility / obedience, some herding in there. And then there are show collies, which are to varying degrees, very much bred for the show ring. I don't know if anybody has a pet collie, but anyway, there's a lot of range in there. And I have observed that sometimes I think people don't quite understand what they're picking for. So the dog that's kind of crazy and moving around a lot, that's a good performance dog. That'll be a good herding dog. Well, the herding dog people would say, actually, no, I couldn't live with that. That dog needs to be tied to the fence and mind itself while the other dogs works. I don't want that in my life. The agility person goes, oh, no, that's perfect for me because I want a dog that runs around a lot. But they don't actually understand that what they're looking at is unfocused, hysterical hyper behavior, not drive at all, right? But then they breed it, and the next thing you know, you have really anxious dogs that move around a lot, have no focus, and you get the classic, if
And
I
they
could
end up
only
with
channel
me.
that drive.
Yeah, they end up in rally classes or agility classes with a reactive dog.
And they're a lot to handle.
Mm-hmm.
They're just a lot to handle
And
because a lot of them are
sad.
very scattered. Yeah. And people are like, oh, he was performance bred. And I don't want to give too many details because I don't want it to be obvious who this is, but I interacted a lot with a dog in this realm, and I knew right away there was a problem with this puppy. And it just kept being, oh, this one's performance bred. This one's performance bred. And I knew what I was looking at, and I knew why they were calling it performance bred. But what I also knew was that the dog had a lot of problems, and that all that movement was anxiety and nervousness. And it ended up a year later, she actually had to send the dog back because, but the justifying it in her mind, in the breeder's mind, that's why I always go back to the roots of the breed if I want to get a dog. So even if I wanted a dog for performance, I would still, if it was a border collie, I would still choose a herding dog. Because the reason border collies are such great performance dogs is their roots. And the roots are exceptional focus and drive for a task. They're not easy to train. He's not easy to train. But the commitment, I'm going to call it stubbornness, even though people don't like that stubborn focus on a task. But he's not a hyper dog at all. He's actually he's busy, but not hyper.
I feel like you're describing my daughter as well.
Yeah.
She's not hyper, but she's hyper focused when she's, on a task and really driven to complete that task. That's the most important thing to her.
Gets done.
As opposed to maybe me, where I'm like, but the experience of it, it's just, and I don't necessarily care.
I get pretty ADHD hyper focused. I wrote a book in 3 days. That's pretty good, huh? I did. It's actually the number one, my best-selling book ever. Train the Dog. Beyond the Backyard. I worked on it 18 hours a day.
I paragraph in years.
It was.
I wrote one story.
I got so targeted. I couldn't stop. I had to work. I would try to go to sleep and I'd get back up and work on it. I have extreme hyperfocus.
A little bit of that. That sounds awesome.
Well, I'm losing it with age. Sadly, I can't really remember even what I had for breakfast anymore. But it was good for a while. So if you have it, take advantage while you got it, because then it all just falls apart.
I get like that with coding. I love to code, and
code, yeah. And you'll get locked in.
I definitely get locked in. I'm definitely one of those people who, once they started coding, yesterday was like this. I spent like 10 or 12 hours on this and realized I had forgotten to eat, and we're doing a second paper on the dog skulls, the internal morphology now, and I was so into it. I've been avoiding it because I thought it was going to be quite boring results, and then once I got into it, I was like, no, this is really interesting, this is cool. And so of course that drove my dogs just nuts. They were like, oh my god, stop just staring at that screen, you're so boring. Like,
somebody asked a question here. How do y'all feel about conditioning exercises to correct structure? Can these things actually increase a dog's efficiency? I believe they can, and here's why. I had a dog several years ago. I was doing position changes with him for my dog sport, and then just completely independent. I taught him how to do them, whatever, and they were varying degrees of good or bad. Let's say 5 out of 10. And then separate, I stopped working on them. I started him on a conditioning program for another reason. About 3 months later, just for fun, I went back and did position changes, and I swear to God, I was stunned at the improvement. So I think just like with people, if you lift weights, it's different than just living an active lifestyle. It's great to live an active lifestyle, doing a lot of stuff, but the targeted effort that when you lift weights, let's say you want to be a swimmer, and so your coach gives you 7 very specific weightlifting activities, I do believe that will transfer over to your sport and improve your fitness. And I don't think just more swimming can actually do that. I think the use of weights is helpful, but it's not correcting the structure. I think what it's doing is ensuring that your dog's muscles are good enough that wherever your dog maybe is a little bit weak, you've done everything in your power to give the dog the benefit of that. And I think the other thing is, if your dog is really, let's say you do a lot of healing and your dog does a lot of heads up healing, right? And it starts to build the structure of the dog just a little bit incorrect, that can make your dog more likely to injure themselves. So I think if you're working with a good fitness professional who knows you do a lot of that, they're going to tell you, I want you to do these other exercises so that you balance out the corresponding muscles that help your dog stay balanced. So yes, I do think I think I should do more with my own dogs. I say enough, but I think I could do more for sure.
An example of that in if you guys watch me is my daughter's horse. So she has an off the track thoroughbred. Thoroughbreds are tall, leggy. They're made to run very, very fast for like a mile and a quarter. So like they would be the more endurance type of horses versus something like a quarter horse that's really powerful in the hind end, that's used for cow horse stuff, roping, barrel racing. Well, Layla's Layla, and she's like, no, I want a thoroughbred. And I'm like, okay, well, that for jumping, that's great. Dressage, that's great. You get a really elegant, beautiful mover, but you just don't see them as barrel racers because they don't have a really thick, strong back end. So she set out to build a horse with a really strong back end and to teach him how to use his hindquarters and not just do everything off of the front and running fast. And slowly she built out this horse, and people, if you saw him from behind, you would think he was a quarter horse because he's so big in the back now. His head obviously gives it away because he has a thoroughbred head. But what's really interesting about that is that because she did that, she was preparing him for barrels and poles, and that helping him with his structure, I guess, with building the muscle around the structures that she needed to be strong, I guess is a way to say it. Then she was able to start doing hard stops with him because they have to dig in with their hindquarters. So now that opens the door to breakaway roping. And she was able to, really do things with him tightly and get him really agile, when really if you looked at him you wouldn't think. It's like watching Kevin Durant play basketball. You're like, how are you moving all of that like that? I would be like gangling around everywhere. But that really stuck out to me because everybody told her that she could not do that. Like people that had been training horses their whole lives were like, that's not a good prospect for that type of horse. And she's like, well, I think if you do the right exercises with them, I think any horse could probably learn how to do these things. And she was right.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I don't think that people appreciate how we call it phenotypic plasticity. So the type of change that you can get that isn't from your underlying genetics, of exercise and building up and repetitive use and stuff like this. I don't think people really appreciate how plastic like vertebrates are and how much they can change just by what they're doing, as well. I'm a bad person to ask about this because I am an evolutionary biologist, and evolution, I think in terms of evolution, and I'm like, oh, it's doing it. So it's not like dead. Great. Because evolution doesn't work on, the survival of the fittest is sort of the thing that people say. And it's not fitness in terms of, how far they can run and what their VO2 max is. It's how many babies. So fitness in biology is how many babies have you had, like how reproductively fit you are. And so if you can pump out a bunch of babies, even if you're a hot mess, I mean, biologically, you're very fit. So
I'm very fit biologically.
and I'm not.
like
Babies,
like
so.
they would make me into a handmaid immediately in that scenario. Immediately. Wow,
Right.
I'm gonna tell everyone I know that.
I was told by a scientist that I'm technically biologically very fit.
So you have high fitness. But the weird thing about evolution is, though, that it tends to, I mean, there's some really elegant things that evolution has produced, but there's a lot of jury-rigged nonsense as well, just because it like works good enough. like, to get you to the baby part, and then sure, keep going.
I have a question, Lindsay.
Mhm.
How was your last research paper received by the community?
It was received really well. I mean, we worked with a couple of people who are really well known in this sort of area, and they seemed to like it a lot. I had a good number of people like posted on Blue Sky and X. I'm not on X anymore. Twitter, dead name Twitter or whatever. But yeah, the uh, we got a lot of publication, like press as well, which was really interesting. Not too much negative. I think there was one person in Reddit that posted about it, and they thought it was like dog phrenology, which I'm like, it is not, but that is going on my business card as dog phrenologist.
Oh, I like that. I like that. I need some fancy title. We all have to think about that. What should we call ourselves?
Well, I used to have crab nose picker because I did my whole dissertation on crab, how they capture odor with their antennuals. So somebody made me business cards with crab nose picker on there. So that's good. But I like dog phrenologist a lot. So
I think those are excellent. Excellent. I have to think about this.
oh,
Well, that was
it's good.
wonderful. We're going to get kicked off in a few minutes, and I don't want that to happen. So I have a question, the last question for you. Do you feel like science is playing an overall positive role within the dog community? Let's say that.
I want to say yes, but is it being received positively? I don't know. Um, this is really interesting. It's an interesting question because I'm not really sure how to answer that. I think science, if if you had said, does science play an overall positive role in society, I would have been like, also, I think I'm neutral on that. Like, it does really great things, but it also does really trashy things too. And people tend to justify a lot of really trashy opinions based on sort of science. And
what do you think are some of the good things that science has added to the dog world?
I think that certainly a lot of animal welfare has been well studied, and I think that we know how to keep dogs so that they're much happier and healthier now, because of a lot of scientific research. I think that there's a lot of room for growth there as well, in terms of what the goal of what you're using science for. I think that it has been used really harmfully to back up, a lot of unhelpful stuff and unhelpful opinions, I think. And one of the things that I get really frustrated in general, and this is not just dog people, but this is regular people too, is the fact that scientists is it's a job that you have, but it's also really specific training that you get. And doing research, I mean, I was in a PhD program for 6 years to learn this. So when you do your research and you look at some papers or you hop onto Google Scholar, I mean, it's not the same as what I do, So
that's not the same, everyone.
it's not the same. I mean, I'm not saying it's not good to read that stuff. I think it's just, it's not doing the same job that I have. And that's fine, because one of the things that I don't do or say is I don't give veterinary advice because I'm not a veterinarian. Yet I see lots of veterinarians give their opinions on science, and they are not scientists. They're not researchers, right? Because that's not the training they have unless you have a PhD DBM. I mean, you're not doing this job if you're not actively engaged in the scientific process. You're not a scientist, and that's fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm definitely never saying to people that you shouldn't understand things, and seek out that knowledge. But I also think that people who read one or two papers and want to tear them apart, like they're a first year grad student, like, guys, that's not science. And it's also not helpful and it's not constructive. So I see a lot of that on Facebook. I used to be sort of a keyboard warrior about it, and I have given up because, first of all, it's just not a good use of my time or my blood pressure to engage with people like that. But it's also just, people more often than not, I think, look to find papers and find bits of science, which may or be good, quality or not quality science, I don't know, to reinforce their previously held position, not.
Denise
Oh,
says they've listened to misunderstand.
Yeah,
And they,
I like
I mean,
doing
yeah.
that is unfortunately the dog world in a nutshell. Everybody is so busy trying to find things to support their position and getting very upset if something doesn't support their position, rather than standing back and saying, one, this is interesting, but even more important, you don't have to make your decisions based on what the current paper came out. It's not like you have to be crazy, flipping all over the place, making your decisions. I've been training dogs a long time. Any single paper coming out is probably not going to change what I do. Even if it's something like it's better to train twice a day for 5 minutes instead of once a day for 10, even things like that. I look at it and I say, well, does this fit my lifestyle? Does this fit my personal experiences with my dogs in my circumstances? Like, there's 100 things that can go into decision making. I want the information because I enjoy information. I like to digest information. I like to think about things. I like having people like Lindsay that I can reach out and say, I don't feel like I understand how to interpret this. What are your thoughts? And I do have access, and I know that's a privilege I have if I have questions. But regardless, I don't think I have to pretend like science is my only driver. It is one of my drivers. And I think to walk away from all of your life experiences and frankly, your own brain and your own processing, sometimes I see papers that come out and I say, that so does not meet with my experiences that I think there's more going on. I don't know what's going on. I'm just going to tell you that this does not meet with my personal experiences. And so, and I've gotten a lot of criticism for that. People saying, you know what, your personal experiences, yeah, no, it's not that I'm saying I don't hear you, but I don't operate in a vacuum. And my world is bigger. And I'm just telling you, in the real world that I operate in, this does not meet my experiences. And I think there's more going on. And I think that would be interesting to try to understand why my experiences don't reflect what I'm seeing here. And unfortunately, I don't see enough people with that attitude. Right now, I see people who are either 100% practitioner. I don't care what science says. I know I've been doing this for 50 years. And then you got the other side that says, I don't care how long you've been doing this. Science says, which science didn't say, science looked at. And I mean, both sides, I think, start to look silly. Yeah, like I don't call myself a science-based dog trainer. And I know a lot of positive reinforcement-based folks do. And the reason is science is not the reason I train the way I do. Ethics is. I like to be kind to my dogs. I really like doing positive stuff. I enjoy the relationship I have with my dogs. And if you told me tomorrow that I could start pounding on them and get everything done twice as fast, nothing would change because that's not why I'm here.
I feel the same way about laws. I'm like, I don't care about those. I'm not going around every day thinking I better do this behavior so I don't break this law. That has nothing to, I'm operating off of my own personal integrity and how I feel I should be moving about in the world. Yeah, I feel the exact same way about the use of the science, trademark the science.
that sort of, you said something really interesting about when a paper comes out and it doesn't jive with my personal experience on something. The difference, and I'll tell you what the huge difference between somebody who's a scientist, like actually like has this job as a scientist, and somebody who isn't, is they see that disconnect and their reaction, like my reaction to that is, that's really interesting. I wonder why that is. As opposed to, that must be wrong because it doesn't square up with what I had. Those little disconnects, those questions that you can ask, those are what drive our research. Like, we're really fascinated with why isn't it matching up with how we understand the world? Why is that standing out? Which is, why I have one paper, which I was just working on it. It's about farfly antennae, and it's no results. I don't understand any of it. But it makes sense, and it's very boring, and I don't want to work on it because it's very boring and is predictable. Whereas this other dog paper is like, oh, that's so interesting because it didn't behave like we expected it to. So that's one of the things that I think are, if anybody takes away anything from that conversation, when you see something and it's science, and it doesn't align with whatever your personal beliefs are, dig deeper and see why that is.
Inquiry, inquire, be curious.
You know what I want my job to be? I want my job to be the CEO of science. So here's how that would work. This would be my job. My job is not to do any of the work. My job is just to say, this is what I want you to study, get to it, right? And then I'll check on you in 6 months. I want that job because I have so many. Wouldn't that be amazing?
You could find out so
many questions.
much.
So many questions and even ideas.
Described what a principal investigator at a lab is.
Oh,
essentially. So
that is a job.
Into a big, essentially, it's just for your little lab, but you know, I'm a professor at a institution, and my job is to support the people in my lab. We don't have a graduate program, but I do have a lot of undergrads. I had a postdoc, things like this. So postdocs are people who have graduated graduate school. They have their PhD, but they're not in a faculty position yet. So it's sort of like in between, and your job is 100% research as a postdoc typically. So but I'm the idea man, for lack of a better words. A lot of this dog research, I didn't have the hands-on experience of actually doing the skulls and, you know, making the models and setting the Lamberts. Those were all my undergrads and my postdoc who did all that work, and my job was to write the grant to get the money, and that's what I did. I wrote the grant to get the money.
Wow. Grant writing's a whole thing.
It is, and it's gonna,
it's a hard time for you, Lindsay. It's a hard time.
I don't know what to say about this.
Right now, our climate is making it very difficult to be a scientist or a researcher, because some pretty crazy stuff is going on from the top down that is exceptionally silencing of the process of science. And it's a scary thing to watch it, and I can't imagine how it feels for you, Lindsay, to be in it.
It's not great. I'll have to say there's not
not great
that I can really say about it at this point, other than we're watching the death of the US as being the dominant scientific power in the world. Like, this is what we're watching right now, is that this is a trip that even if they reversed everything right now, we will not be able to recover from in the amount of time that it will take other countries to overtake us.
So we all need to be reading more of those Indian stories, because that might be all we have left. Is like, I'll be sharing books about
just
my
us
mountain,
and our ancestors.
The world started on my mountain, because that's all we're going to have.
If everyone on the live could just take like 5 minutes to call their Congress critters and say, what's happening at NIH, what's happening at NSF is so destructive that it just can't happen. I mean, yesterday NSF lost 10% of its staff just from, you're done, 168 people. NIH, I think, has lost at least 6 or 8% of its workforce at this point. There's just grants are being frozen, taken away. You know, I was going to be on a panel and it postponed as well. I mean, I can't stress how destructive this is going to be on US science as a whole, and it's not going to be something that we're going to, as an industry, recover from. And it's just like, I don't think people realize like how big science is and how much of our economy is driven by basic research. Like, no, I don't, research the best computer, whatever parts that could be immediately applied, but those ideas that come from basic research are the things that dramatically push us forward. Like penicillin is a perfect example of this. Penicillin was found by a guy who liked to paint portraits on petri dishes with different bacteria because they would turn different colors as they grew. And he left one out too long, and a mold spore fell on it, and it killed everything around it. So it messed up his little landscape. I mean, just unhinged, right? Like, who
That
does?
makes me feel better about all the stuff I trip and fall into that ends up being successful.
And it was like one of those life, history altering drugs that came about because this guy liked to do this weird little thing, painting portraits with bacteria species that were different colors. And he was like, oh, shit.
Wow.
So
That's crazy. I didn't know about the portrait painting.
you never know where these things are going to come from, which is why hitting basic research, even though it seems like waste or whatever, I don't, because they can make
they said the same thing about music in schools. Remember that? Remember when they were like, oh, pish posh. Actually, we need these programs for, our brains.
Very least it makes it less boring as a person.
Right. Yeah, but you know what, Jerry? Because you're going to be the Handmaid's Tale, you're in a good place. Lindsay, I'm a little worried about you because you've never had a child. You're not proven.
You're not proven.
I am, let me say, stayed.
You can be one of the commanders. You can be one of the commander's wives. Don't worry. You don't have to like him. You don't have to like him.
So if everybody could take 5 minutes to call their Congress critter and say, please do something, especially if you're in a red state, that would
call to action.
It's I've done it every week now. Not that I don't live in the blue state, California, the blue congressional district, so I'm not sure what they're gonna.
I've got a lot of followers that live in red states that are staunchly blue. So I know one of them has just said, she's like, I've been calling.
Good.
All right,
Good.
We're about to get cut off, ladies. That was such a fun talk. That was so fun. We covered so many things, and I had some good laughs and learned some stuff.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for having me, and yeah, it was super fun. I enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Hope you come back. This is fun. Don't forget to take our portrait.
Right.
Everybody smile. You ready? We did it.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to put this on YouTube for anybody that missed it, so you can catch it there.
Perfect. Thank you so much, both of you.
Yeah, it was fun. Bye.